I'm flying over to Cape Verde on the 19th.
Good afternoon.
There for 8 days.
Sorry, I'm running a little bit late, but we're going to call this meeting to order. It's a workshop with the City of Council of Fort Walton Beach, Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. If you have a cell phone, if you please put it on vibrate or turn it off, that would be great. If you stand with me, please, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we're here to discuss CDBG workshop, and Chris, you're going to lead us off.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here this afternoon. So this is an item, I think probably in general, I know comes from the council about once or twice a year with the annual action plan and the annual caper in December of each year. So over the last year or two, there's been some discussion about holding a workshop just to kind of talk CDBG prior to our application period and process for the annual action plan. So that's really what we are here this afternoon, really just to talk about the program. We wanted to give you some information about really how the program works, kind of the do's and don'ts of it, and then discuss some of the different programs and projects that we funded over the last few years, and really just said kind of have an open discussion and information for everybody. So we do have a presentation that I'm going to kick off and then turn over to my team to talk about some of the more fun stuff with the projects that we've actually done. I'm going to cover some of the actual CDBG program technical details from this program itself. So we'll go ahead and get moving here. So first, really just a brief overview, the purpose of the program. So the Community Development Block Grant Program, it's a federal program administered federally by HUD. And so here we're an entitlement community. Basically, that means we annually receive a share of funding. There is a formula that HUD has that distributes the big pot of money they get at the federal level to communities across the country. In our case, we receive anywhere usually about $120,000 to maybe $140,000 annually. For this money, it kind of varies. Some years it goes up a little bit, some years it comes down a little bit. Over the last few years, it has come down kind of incrementally over the last couple of years. And so we receive that money, and then we have subrecipients that we have an application period, and the recipients that we award it to then carry out activities to benefit low to moderate income communities. Go ahead. So there are certain primary objectives with the program. This is all federal. Like I said, it's a federal program, so there's federal regulations when it comes to CDBG. And specifically, right off the bat, there's national objectives that we have. The key things to know with the CDBG program are that it must benefit low and moderate income persons, aid in the prevention or elimination of slum and blight, and also meet community development needs, having a particular urgency. So that'd be like that last one specifically, if you're thinking maybe after a storm event, some type of hurricane or disaster, there are sometimes CDBG disaster funds that go towards that specific urgency. Within that too, when primarily we're looking at benefiting that low and moderate income persons, one of the other CDBG rules is that we can't spend less than 70% of our funds on activities that benefit the LMI, the low to moderate income persons. So at least 70% has to go to the LMI category. Next, we just put up here for reference. I know it's pretty small, but we also have it attached in the backup here. When we're looking at the eligible beneficiaries, those low to moderate income residents and households, we just wanted to have, I said mainly for the backup because I know the font's pretty small here. These are the income levels we're looking at. The far right column, the darkest blue, is at 80% of the median area income. And so those are the numbers that we have there or below. Typically it's anywhere from 30 to 50% up to 80% that we're dealing with the eligibility. Again, just trying to give some of the background to how the program works and kind of those boundaries that we have to work within. Okay. So when we're looking at these different national objectives and eligible groups, we looking at the benefiting to low to moderate income persons, there's what we have limited clientele. What that refers to are their specific and targeted groups of individuals to cater to. So we have listed here is what they refer to as the presumed benefit. Any of those groups under there, according to HUD, are groups that are assumed to fall within the income levels and be an eligible beneficiary of HUD funding of programs. So this is one way to look at it, is looking at the limited clientele, and we either income qualify folks that come through and receive these benefits, or they could potentially fall into one of those presumed benefit categories. The next one, if you want to move forward, is the area benefit. So the first one was looking at the individuals and that clientele. The second we have is the area benefit. We have a layer, it's on our GIS, that's our CDBG target areas. If you look at those existing target areas, they were based on some census data from years ago now, and honestly, those boundaries on our map don't seem to make a lot of sense. They don't. If you look at some of the areas that they say are our CDBG target areas, they seem to leave out some of our lower income areas. However, based on HUD's guidance, basically we can look at the census tract block groups, and if there's census tract block groups with 51% or more fall into that 80% AMI, those are areas that we can fund activities within that area, and we don't have to individually income qualify the individuals. They qualify within a area of benefit. There's also an activity for housing that has to do with programs that could help with the development, construction or development of housing, rental assistance, different programs that could help with housing. Yes.
You'll probably get to this, but
Yeah.
just out of curiosity,
Sure.
that area benefit,
Yes.
can 100% of it go there? Or are you going to, I'm sure you're going to
Yes.
get to a percentage.
No, great
breakdown.
question. Yes. So the area benefit, our funding, 100% of our funding can go into those areas. of
So we don't
benefit.
have to divide the 130 10 different ways, 10% here, 10%. We could say 100%. We can
It could
identify
go to one
area and
project.
spend on it.
Exactly. It could go to
Okay.
one project, or it could go to multiple. Something I should have noted there when we're talking about those area benefits or the individuals, the funds that we receive, they're to be spent within our city, and 100% of them within the city, whether it's in a specific area there or specifically to individuals. But yeah, we can put it, like I said, to a specific area there.
If I could interject, that's
Yep.
really why I was hoping, I'm not suggesting
Yep.
that's the reason we have this, but my individual hope we could have this is, instead of us not seeing an impact, if we could focus on an impactful thing to do, such as Carson and 3rd Street. We've done some projects over there and some of those type things. So
Yes.
that's my hope, is that we, instead of sometimes these funds not being used or something similar, that we could come to a consensus, or at least start to narrow staff's focus on bring us an impactful project that could impact the entire neighborhood, be it with a lighting or a streetscaping or something of the sort that could provide for safety and an enhancement of the neighborhood.
100%. I agree. I'm glad he brought it to
Yes.
fruition, because that was my
Yes.
thing. Instead of breaking down 10 or
Exactly.
15, you'd be better off to pick one area, like you said, and have it one big impact one year, instead of dividing it so small to where $10,000, what can you do with it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually what we're going to be getting to next here. Like I said, I was kind of going through some of the boring kind of background of how the program works. When I turn it over to my team here, we're going to go into the specific categories. And we actually, the Carson and 3rd Streetscape project was one example that we were going to use as an infrastructure project. And then you can see the categories, and we can kind of get thinking, hey, yep, we can fit it into this category, and do we want to do a bigger project? Something in a community here, we can kind of have that discussion as we move forward here. So that's exactly where we're heading with this. So, and the last one, and I will move on to that, is the last activity that CDBG does allow is like a job creation or retention activities. Not something we've typically done. We've funded some small amounts, a few thousand here and there for workforce programs, like through other community organizations, nonprofits that have done job fairs and job training assistance. We have funded some through there occasionally over the years. I'm going to move on now and actually turn it over to my team, just to talk about the breakdown there, because this comes into play where we can fund those projects with the percentages that we have limits on. So.
Hi, good afternoon, Tim Gibson, Planning Supervisor for the city. So yeah, perfect segue in there. HUD does have a lot of restrictions on how this money can be spent. It can all be devoted to one project as long as it's the right project. They do have income limits on there for planning and admin, which is what the city kind of administers the program with. We use that to fund like the software we use for the applications, for cover some of the staff time for newspaper ads we're required to publish out there. That's what that 20% allows us to fund that in there. Other than that one, there's a maximum public services. And a lot of that can be like operation of your food banks and some like your homeless shelters, some of the operational types of things. That's a maximum of 15% of the allotted funds. As long as you're meeting that 20% maximum and the 15% maximum, everything else has to go into sometimes of like an infrastructure facility type event out there. Now, all of it could be put into something like you're talking about, like an area benefit. For like if they're wanting to put in like sidewalks in an area, or redo some of the utilities, or some of those types of things, or like the Carson and Third streetscape, that would be considered under the public facilities out there and would be allowed to be in there. But if it were something where we wanted to focus on a public service, we would not be able to do that in there. So if you can go next. The different eligible activities we have out there, the first one is the improved infrastructure, and that's the one where it would be like that area benefit, or like the Carson and Third Street streetscapes that we did several years ago there. Next one would be to improve housing. This is, we've used this in the past to do some sewer lateral replacements for properties that were income qualified individually. We've done roof replacements. That seems to be where we get the most out of that. The last time we did the sewer lateral, we didn't really get a lot of people applying for that. We do kind of have that steady churn of people coming through that just need the assistance to get a new roof put on their property. And we've been able to do that through the improved housing category on there. Next would be economic development. And this is one, kind of like Chris referenced earlier with the job fairs and stuff. 90 Works is a program. They did some job fairs and stuff out there to help with this economic development. They really focused on like helping people get driver's licenses who didn't have driver's licenses and some things like that, just to eliminate some of these barriers to employment that a lot of people have out there. Neighborhood revitalization, and that can be things like, and this is one of the ones with the target demographic as well that Chris mentioned earlier, the pickleball courts that we did with CDBG funds several years ago. I think it was about 5-6 years ago. The pickleball courts that were done there, that was basically approached as a, there had been a lot of sub-recipients out there for some homelessness and even some youth, but there really hadn't been anything targeting any of the elderly community, which is one of the populations that HUD does consider qualified in there. And it seems at the time that the pickleball was, seemed to be growing leaps and bounds, but at the time it really started out being more in that elderly community, and we approached it from that aspect on that one. And then the final one, like I said, is the administrative support, and that's just what the staff can use to fund that. And now that's a 20% maximum. Ultimately, it doesn't have to be there. There have been times in the past where there was just some stuff in there where we didn't take the full 20%. We were able to narrow it down a little bit. Just the only caution on that one is there are expenses associated with this, and that's why that portion of the grant is in there. So theoretically, 100% could be put towards a project, but then that's where the software and the cost for all that kind of stuff and the newspaper ads, that would have to come out of a different fund other than the CDBG funding that is there.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Gibson, one of the eligible activities was the neighborhood revitalization, correct?
Correct.
And if you're getting ready to get to it, I'll hold up, but I just know you went to the administrative support. But projects like Hollywood and streetscape like that, would that qualify for CDBG as far as looking for other revenue sources to help fund that project that I believe we currently have in our 2025 budget, the design phase of that Hollywood project? But could CDBG could be used for those kind of revenue sources or those kind of cost impact
I'll give you the good solid maybe.
Okay.
It is one we really have to look at, and that's where we have to do, for the area impact ones, that's where we really have to look at what is the overall, as long as 51% of that area that's gonna be impacted is considered low to moderate income through the census tract there, then we can put this money towards there. But it really depends on where that is, and that's where like the Carson third one, that area was more than 51% low to moderate income housing, and therefore we could put it there. So we really just have to look at the, you know, income status of whatever section we're looking at that. It's a potential that we could say, okay, well, this section would fall under that 51%, and we could do that area. That would be a possibility.
Thank you.
So there are some ineligible activities. Those are specifically, and these are just outlined by HUD as very specific things that we can't do anything like for our own government uses. We can't build a new city hall or any of that kind of stuff with there. We can use that money, like I said, sometimes it's used to offset some of the staff time that we spend on CDBG. It is allowed for that as long as that's, it can't just pay for a person that's doing other things, but it can't pay for the time we're working on CDBG. General government expenses, you know, whether it's like normal trash pickup or anything like that, but it could be if there's a project to go in and clean up areas, it could be that for a specific project, but just not in general, stuff like that. And obviously can't be used for political activities as well. Next is kind of a breakdown of where we've been with this thing for the past 5 years, and this is including the most recent funding that was approved at the end of last year in there. You can see it's kind of spread out pretty well. This is, you know, kind of, you know, I see where a lot of y'all are talking about, you know, focusing on one versus many and stuff, and a lot of it's, you know, it depends on the direction we want to go with that. You know, in the past, it's been more of a look of, okay, well, let's help as many as we can with this and spread it around as much as we can. And that's really where we've been in there. This breaks down as the rehab nuisance abatement. That's where we're talking about the new roofs, sewer laterals, those types of things. Helping people fix up their individual houses, and each one of those people is specifically income qualified. It is a bit of an intense process to do that. Unfortunately, we have to get a little intrusive into finances and stuff, but that's really just to protect the program so that we can report back to HUD and show, no, these people are, we're helping the right population with that there. Next would be Elder Services, and that's Elder Services of Okaloosa County. They were running a program for a couple of years where they were essentially like a Meals on Wheels for some of the elderly during the COVID times and stuff like that. Next would be Food Pantry, and it was a little over, well, almost 70,000 and that's a variety of different food pantries for a variety of different reasons. Some of it's been to, you know, fix broken freezers or to even improve some shelters that they've got in there, and some of it's just to pay for like some of their part-time workers and stuff, but that's all been related in there. Next would be medical. Most of the medical ones on here have been for either some treatment for homeless, or there's other programs for providing medication as well for those who can't afford their medication. Not necessarily homelessness, but you know, them and anyone else who can't afford it in there. And those organizations do income qualify the individual that they're supporting in there. Top right, oh sorry, go back. Yeah, a little under 100,000 was spent towards youth. This was really split between Boys and Girls Club and the City of Fort Walton Beach Recreation Department youth program, where we can pay for, again, income qualified individuals, whether it's, you know, program fees or whatever that they needed for that to allow their youth to participate in those programs. And then the big one was 250,000, was 251,000 spent towards homelessness. Again, this is some towards operational stuff. Some of it's been put towards, you know, some actual development and facility improvements with the HHA and out at One Hopeful Place.
I'll wait.
So the process is, really for the annual action plan, that's the one that you guys see mostly. It comes in typically, we try to bring it in August. We really have to have it submitted no later than September 15th. But we really start at the beginning of the year. We start putting out some public notices, letting everybody know that, hey, this is coming. It's a standard thing. We definitely do email blast to all the people who applied previously, let them know, hey, this is going to be opening up. In February, we published a notice in the papers that the window is opening up for applications. We do run that application period from March 1st till around April 15th every year. And that's really the 6-week period, and that's where they go in on the software that we have, and they can fill out all of exactly what they're wanting to do, how their finances break down. It's pretty in-depth, but it gives us a really good idea of what exactly are you wanting to spend this money on. And it allows them to really break it down as well, because you know, they may be requesting $50,000, but you know, $20,000 is going to be used for this and $5,000 for that. And it really lets it to where we can kind of break that down even. And it's like, okay, well, I've only got $10,000 to give you. Where do we want to put that $10,000 towards and stuff? So it really lets them break that down in there for us to use. And then once that's up, middle of April, we do staff, we generate up reports, and that's shared out with our Citizen Advisory Council, which are just local residents that come in. They've got their, you know, their thumb on the pulse of what's going on in the neighborhood, where this money is needed. We work closely with them to kind of come up with a recommendation that's then presented to City Council on where this money can be. We do a meeting with them. It's a public meeting. Typically, a lot of the subrecipient applicants will show up to that and kind of give their, hey, this is what we're trying to do with this, and this is why we think it's a good deal. And then ultimately, you know, following those requirements that I listed earlier with the 15% for public services and stuff, we keep that in mind, and that's where we make our recommendations out there for how that's done. Then once that's done, we draft up the annual action plan. We do have to publish it for 30 days out there. We put it in various locations around the city, like the Housing Authority, the library, City Hall, and we publish newspaper ads identifying that where it's at for people to kind of come and just take a look at it. And then that culminates at the end of that with a public hearing where people can come in and kind of give their 2 cents on it however they want. Historically, that has been very underattended. In my time at the city, there's only been one person show up to any of those meetings that's held every year. It's something we tried to generate support for, but if people either are very happy with the plans that are being submitted out there, or they're just not coming in to give their input on that one. And then after that, it comes and it's presented to you at council, like it has been for most of you. You've been through that several times to get your recommendation for approval. Ultimately, it does end up have to go up to HUD, and usually by, depending on when we get it in there, toward the end of the year, they'll come down with either a solid approval or let us know that we need to make some changes to it. Typically, it's an approval because, you know, they're just looking to make sure we're following all of our percentage requirements and everything in there. The next one is going to be for the 5-year consolidated plan. This is one that we're working on right now. The last one was done obviously in 2020. And honestly, we're really trying to work through that process now. It was one that actually was being worked on when I started with the city. One of the very first projects I got to work on with the city, not knowing what CDBG was or HUD or any of that kind of stuff. So it was a learning experience for me. And unfortunately, it's only, fortunately and unfortunately, it's every 5 years. So it's not something you get good at, and you don't do it repeatedly. It's something that Amy, who is our primary person on staff, she really runs this program and has it going well. I just get to stand up here and look pretty, which is probably what I do best. So she really keeps it going. She's worked with our Citizen Advisory Council. She's got basically a new timeline that's been established that we're going to use moving forward. These are self-imposed deadlines and stuff on these. This is not something that we have to do, but it's just something we think in order to move forward better with this in the future, we're going to kind of codify some of these timelines in there. We'll really start like a year and a half before, well, about a year before it's going to come to you guys in City Council in there. What we'll do is we're going to start putting out newspaper ads around September the year prior, asking for input on what that consolidated plan is. The consolidated plan is really, it's a very large, in-depth, there's a lot of data analysis in there. We do have to work with several other agencies. Big one is the Homelessness and Housing Alliance, HHA, to get the input on how, because a lot of with the HUD, this stuff is generated around homelessness, and a lot of the impact around that. So we do work with them to get the input for this plan, but the really big thing is, where do we want to focus for the next 5 years? What are some of the general areas? It doesn't have to be a specific project, but for example, several of you brought up like area benefit kind of stuff. If that's what we want to focus on, that's what we identify in that 5-year consolidated plan. It's
If you're
really to
looking for
keep
a
it kind of more
consensus, yeah.
strategically thinking versus every year we're going to come in and just change directions on stuff. And really, we're kind of held by that every year, that what we do has to basically be in line with what's in the con plan, the 5-year con plan. Yes, sir.
So my 5-year plan would definitely be large projects, area benefit. We already went over that earlier. But I just want to ask about the process for the public, involvement in newspaper. Let's say ahead of time, if that's our 5-year plan, do we still open the doors and take all those applications? Or can you just say, we've already identified a specific project, we're going to advertise it, and here it is, and come to the meeting if you like? Because ultimately, at the end of this, it all comes back to council for approval.
Ultimately, it does
correct?
all come back to council for approval, no matter what we do with it.
So how would that work if council ahead of time, prior to January, said, like we were discussing, we want to go the area benefit route? How does that advertisement process work? I mean, obviously, do you still have to do it to appease the federal?
Yeah. I think we would still have to advertise. I think statutorily we would.
But you would just advertise that we've selected this project to get accomplished, and you can come to the.
I think we have to open it up for anyone to apply, and any eligible nonprofit could apply for these things. But again, if it's where in the con plan we decide to say we're focusing on these areas, if it wasn't one of those areas, then ultimately we couldn't even go in those directions, because again, we have to tie it back every time we do the annual action plan. We have to tie it back to one of the focuses in the 5-year con plan.
So the
if
next
it wasn't
5-year
something
plan-
connected to that, we just couldn't do it.
And then back to the overhead, you're saying up to 20% is the maximum. Say you get the 140,000, it's only 120, 140, say 130, up to 20% goes towards overhead, but it can be 10%.
That's correct.
And I look at that too and say the same thing. If we pick one specific project like we've been discussing, it seems like there's a lot of staff's time that's involved in this to divide this cookie jar so many different ways. So that's why we're getting to this 20% every time, because it's so time consuming. If we picked one large project, a lot less would go to overhead, a lot more would go to the project. Your job would be easier. Everybody's job would be easier. We'd get a bigger project done. You could get more bang for your buck. Does that make sense? And I also go back to, there was a lot of times in the past that we've been up here and seen like,
Yeah.
when you divide it though, there's still funds out there that we have to go back and follow up. Have you used it? Have you done this? If we pick a project, we know they're going to get used. Well,
Yes.
eventually.
Absolutely, yes, and one good point that Amy brought up here, if we do larger projects ourselves, there's another process that we then have to do, is an environmental review through HUD, so we'll be saving a lot of time with all the other sub-recipients and all that, but we would have to go through an environmental review process for our own projects, which is actually also time consuming. Different time, I don't know if it's a 1-for-1 ratio, but our time would be replaced doing these environmental reviews to some regard.
But then we don't have to follow
But
up
then
years
it's
later
on
and see
us,
balances and where
Oh, for sure.
was it spent. So
Yes, correct, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm glad we had this workshop because I've learned a lot more about this. Awesome presentation. And I
Timing
want
is-
area
yeah.
benefit.
That's-
One
we're doing
project,
5-year
area
plan.
benefit, yeah.
Yeah, doing a 5-year plan now, so that's really why we thought it was probably good timing to get you guys in your input and all.
Yeah.
Over here.
Very helpful.
And part of that, part of the 5-year comp plan is also doing a needs assessment. Amy drafted up a really good survey. It was put out for a couple of months, actually, towards the end of last year. We start gathering all this data and everything out there. It was published on the city's social media. It was put on flyers, posted all around the city, including some of where our sub-recipients have received grants in the past. We put it up there just so that we could try to get it. We worked with some of our CAC members to try to get them and get this out there and get as much input in there. We did get quite a few responses. Most of them were not from like the target demographic in there. So some of the responses were asking like for what your income levels are. And most of the responses were not in the target demographic area, but there was still good input on there. Most of those responses were geared towards affordable housing and homelessness, is really kind of where the focus of the results of that were at, and everything. So that's one thing we do have to focus on as well in there. And ultimately, I mean, yes, it's gonna come through city council and have y'all's input on there, but we do still have to run it through our citizen advisory council to give them their input on this as well, because again, they're there to provide that input on what does the community think we need. So we gotta make sure we're keeping them involved in that review process as well. And some of them are here today, if you've got questions for them.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chris, in that part of the environmental process that you were just, not to drill in too deep on that technical side of that, but would the Citizen Advisory Committee still be involved if we went to that process with the?
They would in this process still, yes. The environmental itself is done at the staff side for that paperwork, really, it's a paperwork process there. But as far as the projects themselves, providing that input, like I said, we have to make sure it meets, whatever goals that we outlined in the 5-year plan.
But either path,
But they're
citizens
still
are
gonna-
involved.
Either path, we're still gonna have that CAC input. We're still gonna provide recommendations to city council, each year, and it'll stay, based on, consistency with the consolidated plan, based on what we received, potentially, if we say, hey, we set out the goal, hey, here's a project that, one big project, city project we want to do, here it is, and if we receive other applications, what we would do is go through both of them, obviously vet them, and then provide you all the options, and, if the one big project meets our, goal, then, that's the route we're probably gonna take, but, yes, it still involves that public process.
And as far as, we have Chief Page here today, my vision, and this is just a kind of an idea that I'm hoping that y'all can say, I know you said that, but this is really what we need, is that we could work with the police department to say, do we need a streetscape on expand 3rd Street or 1st Street, or helping, say that just as we did with the Hollywood, we had more traffic accidents there. But if there's an area in that section of town that we can provide lighting to enhance public safety, and or if be it one side or the other from the public safety perspective, but that's kind of what I'm hoping that we're going to see is that collaboration to get us our best bang for the buck.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I think between their data and we can map it. We have our census tracks. We can kind of overlay our census tracks based on their public safety data. We kind of see maybe where those kind of hot zones are, and then be able to identify some projects that way.
And this way, it helps the folks that live adjacent to these properties, but also the ones that are on the neighboring streets that walk and use our public sidewalks and streets. And it's made a difference, and I drive it on a virtually nightly basis, and it helps everyone. It's nice.
For sure.
Other questions from council for Chris or Tim or Amy? Anyone from the public wish to?
Well, I had just one more thing.
Oh, go ahead. I'm so
If we
sorry.
can, the last
Go ahead.
slide on there. It's just the process for the CAPER. Since we're here, we wanted to give you all this sort of stuff, so most of you have seen that. That's just basically the report we send back to HUD. It's a fairly simple report, what we send to HUD on. It's really what did we expend this year, which ones, which project years were we spending out of, what our overall end of the day or end of the year where we're sitting right now. So that just starts in October. It's got to be submitted to HUD by the end of December, so that's why usually the 1 December meeting we bring it to there. That way we got the most up-to-date information that we can present to you before we have to submit it into HUD. And that was all.
Yep. Did want to add, our CAC members are here. We appreciate they're taking their time out this afternoon, so just want to let you all know that they are here as well. We work with them each year through this process. So we're going to open any more comments, any questions. I think we've received a lot of good direction as far as how we move forward into this process this year and beyond. Thank you.
Really good presentation. Seconds, council, anybody?
Thank you for serving on the board, and thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. If that's going to do it for us. Yes, sir.
I had a comment from Mr. Walker, and he just wanted to let it be known that read into the record that he doesn't support more governmental intervention under the pretense of helping. It only makes things worse and more expensive. The free market is best at providing the solutions. So that's a note from Mr. Walker.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, anybody else? No further business in front of us? We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.